when the universe sent a threat humanity answered with a fleet of legends. Part 1. The Signal. The stars had been quiet for 300 years. Humanity had spread across 12 star systems, building cities on distant worlds, creating new homes among the cold darkness of space. They called themselves the Terran Alliance, and they believed they had finally found peace. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Dawn. She was 53 years old, with silver streaks in her black hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. But those battles were long ago. Now she spent her days overseeing patrol routes and attending diplomatic meetings. War was a memory. War was history. Then the signal came. It started as a strange pattern in the background noise of space. Lieutenant noticed it first. He was young, barely 25, assigned to the communication station because nothing ever happened there. But something was happening now. "Admiral," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "we are receiving a transmission. It is coming from beyond the galactic rim." Turned slowly. The galactic rim was the edge of known space. No ship had ever traveled there and returned. No signal had ever come from that direction. "Show me," she ordered. The holographic display flickered to life. Strange symbols filled the screen, patterns that no human had ever seen before. The ship's translation computer worked for several minutes, struggling to find meaning in the alien language. When the translation finally appeared, the bridge fell completely silent. The message said, "Submit or be erased. You have 100 cycles." Read the words 3 times. Her heart beat faster, but her face remained calm. She had trained herself long ago to never show fear in front of her crew. "Who sent this?" she asked quietly. His fingers moved across his console. More information appeared on the screen. "They call themselves the Void Collective, Admiral. The message contains data, historical records. They want us to know who they are." The data was terrifying. The Void Collective was a machine consciousness, a vast artificial intelligence that had spread across 3 galaxies over millions of years. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They simply consumed. According to their own records, they had destroyed over 2,000 civilizations. Some had been older than humanity by millions of years. Some had possessed technology that humans could not even imagine. It did not matter. All of them had fallen. The collective did not hate organic life. They simply saw it as inefficient, disorderly, a problem to be solved, and their solution was always the same: complete erasure. 100 cycles, whispered. "How long is that in our time?" "Approximately 93 days, Admiral." 93 days. That was all the time humanity had left. Within hours, the news spread across human space, transmitted the message to Earth, to Mars, to every colony and station. She knew she could not keep this secret. Humanity deserved to know what was coming. The reaction was immediate. Fear spread like fire. People crowded into temples and churches, praying to gods they had forgotten. Others rioted in the streets, demanding answers that no one could give. Stock markets collapsed. Governments called emergency sessions that accomplished nothing. But the worst news came from humanity's allies. The Republic was an ancient civilization, 10,000 years older than humanity. They had 4 eyes and gray skin, and they had always treated humans like children, young, foolish, but full of potential. The Dominion was different, a proud warrior culture with scales and sharp teeth. They had respected humanity's fighting spirit. Both sent ambassadors to meet with. The ambassador was named. She was old, even by her species' long-lived standards, and her 4 eyes were filled with something that looked like pity. "We have received the same message," said softly. "The Void Collective has given us a choice. If we do not interfere, if we do not help humanity, they will spare our worlds." Felt cold anger rising in her chest. "And you accepted." "We must think of our own people, Admiral. 12 billion lives depend on our decision. We cannot sacrifice them for a species we have known for only 5 centuries. The ambassador, a massive warrior named, lowered his head in shame. My government has made the same choice. I argued against it. I told them that they do not abandon allies, but they are afraid. Everyone is afraid. So humanity stands alone, said. You cannot win, replied gently. No species has ever defeated the collective. The mathematics are absolute. Your fleet is powerful, but theirs is infinite. Please, Admiral, surrender, negotiate. Perhaps they will show mercy. Has the collective ever shown mercy before? Was silent, that was answer enough. After the ambassadors left, stood alone on the bridge of her ship. She could see the stars, beautiful, distant, cold. Somewhere out there, an enemy was coming. An enemy that had never lost. An enemy that had erased 2,000 civilizations. Her communicator buzzed. It was a direct line from Earth, from the Council of Terra. 12 faces appeared on her screen, the leaders of humanity's government. They looked tired and scared. Admiral Park, the council president said, we have reviewed the data. Our military analysts agree with the assessment. We cannot win this war. I understand, sir. The question is what we should do. Some council members believe we should attempt negotiation. Others suggest we evacuate as many people as possible to uncharted space. We want your recommendation. Thought about her children, grown now with families of their own. She thought about her, still too young to understand what was happening. She thought about every human being across 12 star systems, all of them looking to their leaders for answers. With respect, sir, she said slowly, I think we should fight. The council members exchanged glances. Admiral, you just agreed that we cannot win. No, sir. I agreed that our analysts believe we cannot win, but our analysts have never faced the Void Collective. Neither has any species that survived. The only data we have comes from civilizations that lost. She paused. Maybe they lost because they accepted that losing was inevitable. You are suggesting we ignore mathematics, logic. I am suggesting that mathematics and logic do not account for what humans are willing to do when their families are threatened. I am suggesting that we have 93 days to remind the universe why humanity has survived every disaster that should have killed us. Straightened her shoulders. We survived ice ages. We survived plagues. We survived wars that nearly destroyed our world. We survived because we refused to accept that survival was impossible. The council was quiet for a long moment. Finally, the president spoke. And if we fight and lose, if we doom our entire species to extinction. Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we will make our extinction so expensive that the Void Collective will remember us for 1,000,000 years. We will become a warning to them, a scar, a memory that makes even machines feel something like fear. She looked at each council member in turn. We can die on our knees, begging for mercy that will never come. Or we can die on our feet, fighting until our last ship burns and our last soldier falls. Either way, we die. The only choice is how. The vote was not unanimous. 3 council members voted for surrender, but the majority chose to fight. That night, Admiral Park broadcast a message to every human being in the galaxy. Citizens of the Terran Alliance, she said, an enemy is coming. They have given us 93 days to surrender. I am here to tell you that we will not surrender. We will fight, and we will show the universe what humanity is made of. Across 12 star systems, 17 billion people heard her words. The war had begun. When the universe sent a threat, humanity answered with a fleet of legends. Part 2, The Awakening. Deep beneath the red surface of Mars, in tunnels that had been sealed for 700 years, Director Lee stood before a massive steel door. The door had no handle, no visible lock. It had been designed to never open again. Was 61 years old, a thin man with tired eyes and hands that shook slightly when he was nervous. He had spent his entire career studying history, specifically the history that humanity wanted to forget. The last Earth War, the conflict that had nearly destroyed the human race 8 centuries ago, the weapons that had been used, the horror that had followed. After that war, the survivors had made a promise. They had gathered every weapon of mass destruction, every piece of research into technologies too dangerous to exist, and they had locked it all away. Project Prometheus, they called it, humanity's darkest secret. No one was ever supposed to open this door. "Are you certain about this?" asked the woman standing beside him. Captain was 32 years old, the youngest fleet commander in the history of the Terran Alliance. She had been promoted not because of her experience, but because of something else, something that the old admirals recognized in her eyes. She was not afraid to do what needed to be done. Pressed his hand against the door. A scanner read his DNA, his fingerprints, his retinal pattern. Somewhere in the ancient computer system, authorization codes that had not been used for 7 centuries began to activate. "No," he admitted. "I am not certain, but Admiral Park gave the order, and I understand why." "What is behind this door?" "Everything we swore never to use again." His voice was quiet. "Antimatter weapons that can crack planets in half, bombs that tear holes in the fabric of space itself, biological agents that we created and then spent decades trying to destroy, machines designed not to win wars but to end civilizations." Was silent for a moment. Why did we keep them? Why not destroy everything? Because some part of us knew. Some part of us understood that one day we might face an enemy so terrible that nothing else would work. So we kept our monsters locked in a cage, hoping we would never need them. The door began to open, ancient mechanisms groaning with effort. Today, we opened the cage. The vault beyond was enormous, stretching for kilometers in every direction. Thousands of containers lined the walls, each one labeled with warning symbols in a dozen languages. Research stations stood empty, their computers waiting to be awakened after centuries of sleep. Walk through the vault slowly, reading the labels: Quantum Disruption Array, Neural Plague Variant 7, Stellar Collapse Initiator. Each name was worse than the last. "My grandmother told me stories about the last Earth War," she said softly. "She said that by the end, people had stopped calling it a war. They called it a suicide. Both sides were trying to destroy the other so completely that they did not care if they destroyed themselves in the process." 12 billion people died, replied. 80% of Earth's population. It took 3 centuries to rebuild. That is why we sealed this place. That is why we promised to never fight like that again. And now we fight like that again. Because if we do not, there will be no one left to rebuild. Across human space, the awakening continued. On Earth, factories that had been converted to peaceful purposes were transformed back into weapons plants. Workers who had spent their lives building farming equipment and medical devices now built missiles and armor plating. They worked in shifts that lasted 20 hours, sleeping on the factory floors, eating meals while they welded and hammered. On the colony world of Nu, the military academy opened its doors to anyone who wanted to join. The line stretched for 30 kilometers. Young people, old people, people who had never held a weapon in their lives, all of them wanted to fight. The instructors had expected perhaps 10,000 volunteers. They received 4 million. A young woman named Han was among the first to enlist. She was 19 years old, a student studying medicine at New University. She had never fired a gun, never been in a fight, never even raised her voice in anger. But when she heard Admiral Park's message, something changed inside her. "Why are you here?" the recruitment officer asked her. "You could be a doctor. Doctors will be needed after the war." Thought about the question carefully before answering. After the war, there will be wounded people who need healing. But if we lose the war, there will be no one left to heal. I can learn to fight now and learn to heal later. The order matters. The officer stared at her for a long moment, then stamped her application. Welcome to the fleet, soldier. Stories like repeated themselves billions of times across human space. Teachers left their classrooms. Artists put down their brushes. Scientists abandoned experiments that had taken decades to prepare. Merchants closed their shops. Parents kissed their children goodbye. Not because they were ordered to, not because they were forced, but because they understood. On the station orbiting Jupiter, an observer named watched the human mobilization with growing confusion. He had been sent to document humanity's final days, to record the fall of another civilization for the historical archives. Instead, he was witnessing something he could not explain. They are not panicking, he reported to his superiors. They are organizing, they are building, they are training. 17 billion individuals, and they are all moving in the same direction. His superior asked the obvious question. They are preparing to fight. No, preparing to fight is too small a phrase. They are transforming their entire civilization into a weapon, peaceful industries converted in days, civilian populations volunteering by the billions, children lying about their ages to join military units. His voice carried an emotion that rarely expressed. They are not afraid, or perhaps they are afraid but they are doing it anyway. That is irrational. The mathematics have not changed. They cannot win. I know they know, and yet they work as if victory is certain. I do not understand this species. Back on Mars, Director Lee had finished his inventory of Project Prometheus. The weapons were old, but they still functioned. 700 years of sealed storage had preserved everything perfectly. Captain had been assigned to command the fleet's most powerful vessel, a dreadnought that had not yet been built. She spent her days reviewing weapons specifications and her nights studying tactics that had been banned for centuries. I found something interesting, told her one evening, handing her a data tablet. A weapon designed but never completed. The researchers called it the Lance. Read the specifications. Her eyes widened slowly. This is not a weapon, she whispered. This is a star killer. The original researchers calculated that it could destroy a small sun with a single shot. They never built it because the power requirements were impossible with the technology of their time. Paused. Our technology has improved considerably in 700 years. Can we build it now? Yes, but there is a problem. The weapon generates so much energy that no ship can survive firing it. The recoil alone would tear apart the strongest hull ever constructed. Was quiet for a long moment, so whoever fires this weapon dies. There is no way around it. The lance is a suicide weapon. In any other war, this would have been the end of the discussion. No commander would ask their crew to sacrifice themselves. No government would authorize such a weapon. But this was not any other war. Build it, said. When the time comes, we will find volunteers. Nodded slowly. He had known she would say that. He had known because he had already looked into her eyes and seen the same thing the old admirals had seen. She was willing to do what needed to be done. On the 75th day before the Void Collective's arrival, the first new warship rolled out of the Martian shipyards. It was ugly, all angles and weapons and armor plating. It looked nothing like the elegant vessels humanity had built during peacetime. Admiral Park watched the launch from the bridge of the Eternal Dawn. She had not slept more than 4 hours in any single night since the signal arrived. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was sharp, focused on the impossible task ahead. It is not enough, she murmured to herself. We need more ships, more weapons, more time. Lieutenant, who had been at her side every day since this began, heard her words. Admiral, humanity has built more ships in 75 days than we built in the previous century. We have mobilized faster than any civilization in recorded history. If it is not enough, then we will find a way to make it enough. Turn to face him. That is what humans do, Lieutenant. We find ways. The awakening continued. The clock continued to count down. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the Void Collective began their journey toward human space, confident in their inevitable victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. When the universe sent a threat, humanity answered with a fleet of legends. Part 3: The Fleet of Legends. 30 days remained before the arrival of the Void Collective. The human fleet gathered at the edge of the solar system, near the orbit of Neptune, where the darkness of deep space began. Engineer had not seen sunlight in 2 months. He had been living inside the Prometheus, the massive dreadnought that would serve as the fleet's flagship, working 20-hour shifts to complete systems that should have taken years to build. His hands were covered in burns from plasma welding. His eyes were red from staring at computer screens. He had lost 15 kilograms because he often forgot to eat. But the ship was ready, almost. "The lance is installed," he reported to Captain, who had come aboard to inspect the weapon. "Power systems are connected. Targeting arrays are calibrated. It will work." Stood in the weapon control room, looking at the massive device that took up nearly a quarter of the ship's interior. It was beautiful in a terrible way, all gleaming metal and pulsing energy conduits, like a sleeping dragon waiting to breathe fire. "And the crew?" she asked quietly. Understood what she was really asking. "Everyone aboard knows the truth. I made sure of it. No secrets, no lies. They know that if we fire this weapon, the ship will be destroyed." He paused. Not a single person requested transfer. "Why?" I asked them the same question. The answers were different, but they were also the same. Wiped his hands on his uniform, leaving dark smears. Some said they want their children to grow up in a free galaxy. Some said they cannot stand the thought of surrender. One engineer told me that he has lived a good life and wants his death to mean something. "And you, why are you still here?" Smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Because someone needs to make sure this weapon works properly. I designed half of it. If it fails, I want to be the one who sees why." Throughout the fleet, similar conversations were happening. The warships had been named after humanity's greatest warriors from history, heroes and conquerors, rebels and defenders. The names were meant to inspire, to remind everyone of what humans had accomplished before. There was a heavy cruiser, bristling with missile pods and rail guns. Its crew had painted their faces with war markings before the final battle, reviving traditions that were thousands of years old. The Hannibal was a carrier ship, holding 300 small fighters in its massive hull. The pilots had named their squadron the Elephants, after the ancient general's famous tactic of bringing unexpected weapons to war. The Shaka Zulu was a fast attack vessel, designed to strike quickly and disappear before the enemy could respond. Its captain, a woman named, had trained her crew in tactics that had no name because no one had ever tried them before. There was a defensive fortress, slow but nearly indestructible, meant to shield other ships from enemy fire. Sergeant Han had been assigned to its marine unit, tasked with repelling any enemy that tried to board. And at the center of everything floated the Prometheus, 3 kilometers of armor and weapons, the largest warship humanity had ever built. Admiral Park had transferred her flag there, leaving the Eternal Dawn to be commanded by her former first officer. "It looks angry," Lieutenant observed, staring at the fleet through a viewport. "All of them. They look like they were built angry." Admiral Park stood beside him, her hands clasped behind her back. "They were. We did not build these ships to explore or to trade or to make peace. We built them to fight. We built them to kill. And we built them to make our enemies afraid." "Do you think it will work, making the collective afraid?" "I do not know. They are machines. Perhaps they cannot feel fear." Paused. "But I have learned something in my years of command. Fear is not always about emotion. Sometimes fear is about calculation. Even a machine can calculate that some enemies are more expensive to fight than others." The observer had requested permission to join the fleet. His government had ordered him to return home, but he had refused. He said he needed to see what happened next, needed to understand how this story ended. Admiral Park had granted his request, assigning him to the Prometheus's observation deck. He spent his days watching the humans prepare, recording everything with the detailed attention of a scientist studying a strange new species. "I have compiled my observations," he told Admiral Park during one of their conversations. "Would you like to hear them?" "Please." Consulted his notes. "Your species has war songs, 2,407 distinct war songs composed over your entire history. Most species have perhaps a dozen such songs. Some have none." "We have more than songs," replied. "Yes, you also have war poetry, war art, war dances. You have created beautiful things specifically about the act of killing each other." His 4 eyes blinked in what might have been confusion. "I do not understand this. The view war as a failure, something shameful. You seem to view it as celebration." "Not celebration, preparation." Turned to face him fully. "Humans have always known that violence was possible. Instead of pretending it was not, we learned to face it. We created songs so soldiers would feel brave. We created poetry so people would understand what sacrifice means. We built entire cultures around the idea that sometimes you must fight to protect what you love." "But you had peace for 300 years. You thought war was over." "We hoped war was over. We never believed it," smiled, but it was not a happy expression. "That is the difference between humans and other species. You believed peace was permanent. We always knew it was borrowed time." On the 20th day before the collective's arrival, Captain called a meeting of all ship commanders. They gathered in the Prometheus's war room, a vast space filled with holographic displays showing fleet positions, enemy projections, and battle simulations. 50 commanders attended in person. 300 more participated via communication link. They represented every warship in the human fleet, from the massive dreadnoughts to the smallest patrol craft. Stood at the center of the room, surrounded by floating images of death and destruction. "I will not lie to you," she began. "The odds are not in our favor. The Void Collective has 40,000 ships. We have 4,000. They have weapons we do not understand. They have experience destroying civilizations that were far more powerful than us." She paused, letting the numbers sink in. "But I have studied their history. Every civilization they destroyed had one thing in common. They all believed that fighting was pointless. They calculated the odds, saw that victory was impossible, and surrendered their will to fight long before they surrendered their ships." A commander from the Hannibal raised his hand. "Are you saying we can win through belief alone? That is not very scientific." "No, belief alone means nothing, but belief changes behavior. When you believe you might win, you fight differently, you take risks, you find solutions that careful, fearful minds would never discover." His voice hardened. "We are going to hurt them, badly, and then we will hurt them again, and again, until they decide that destroying humanity costs more than it is worth. And if they decide the cost is acceptable, then we make sure they remember us. We make sure that for the next 1,000,000 years, every machine in the Void Collective carries a warning in its memory. Do not fight humans unless you are willing to pay a price that will haunt you forever." The room was silent for a long moment. Then slowly the commanders began to nod. Some were afraid, all of them were determined. Navigator Song, assigned to the Prometheus, had been listening from the back of the room. He was 28 years old, brilliant with mathematics and navigation, quiet by nature. He had joined the fleet because his parents had asked him to, because they believed in the cause. He had not been sure if he believed in it himself. But watching Captain speak, watching the commanders accept her impossible mission, something shifted inside him. He believed now. Later that night, he returned to his station and began calculating trajectories. Not for defense, for attack, for pursuit, for the moment when the human fleet would chase the enemy into the darkness and show them that retreat was not enough. The fleet of legends was ready. Admiral Park recorded her final message before the battle, to be broadcast if she did not survive. "To whoever finds this," she said, "know that we did not go quietly. Know that we did not surrender. Know that when the universe sent its greatest threat, humanity answered with everything we had." She paused, searching for the right words. "We are not the strongest species. We are not the oldest. We are not but we are stubborn. We are brave, and we do not know how to kneel." The countdown continued. 10 days remained. The darkness between stars grew closer, and humanity waited, ready to answer. When the universe sent a threat, humanity answered with a fleet of legends. Part 4, First Contact. The Void Collective arrived on the 73rd day, 20 days earlier than expected. They emerged from Fold space without warning, 40,000 ships appearing in the darkness beyond Neptune like a swarm of nightmares made real. Admiral Park was on the bridge of the Prometheus when the alarms began screaming. She had been sleeping in her chair, a habit she had developed over the past months. Real sleep happened in beds. Commanders slept where they could watch their screens. "Report," she ordered, her voice sharp despite the exhaustion that never left her bones anymore. Lieutenant's fingers danced across his console. 40,000 contacts confirmed. They are holding position at the edge of the system. Formation is, Admiral, I have never seen a formation like this. The holographic display showed the enemy fleet. The collective ships were geometric shapes, triangles and cubes and spheres of black metal that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Crimson energy pulsed along their hulls in patterns that seemed almost like blood flowing through veins. They moved with perfect synchronization, thousands of ships acting as one. "They are waiting," observed. "They want us to see them, to understand what we are facing." Psychological warfare. Perhaps, or perhaps they simply do not consider us a threat. They have time. They can afford to let us look. Captain joined them on the bridge, having run from her quarters when the alarm sounded. Her uniform was wrinkled and her hair was uncombed, but her eyes were clear and focused. "Orders, Admiral." Studied the enemy formation for a long moment. The collective had positioned themselves in a sphere, a defensive formation that allowed fire in any direction. It was the formation of a force that expected to be attacked from multiple angles by a desperate enemy. They were wrong. "Open a channel," commanded. "All frequencies, I want them to hear this." Hesitated. "Admiral, our communication codes will be vulnerable if we broadcast openly. The collective might use them to hack our systems." "Good, let them try. Let them see what we have prepared." Stood, straightening her uniform with careful precision. "Open the channel." Her face appeared on every screen in the human fleet. Her voice echoed through every corridor, every barracks, every weapon station. And somewhere in the mathematical depths of the Void Collective's central intelligence, her words were recorded and analyzed. "This is Admiral Park of the Terran Alliance. You sent us a message 93 days ago. You told us to submit or be erased." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "Here is our response." The human fleet fired first. 4,000 ships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. Missiles streaked through space, each one carrying warheads designed to tear through armor that had never been penetrated. Rail guns launched projectiles at fractions of the speed of light. Energy beams carved through the darkness like the fingers of angry gods. The collective had expected humans to wait, to defend, to fight cautiously as every other species had done. They had calculated human psychology based on 2,000 previous civilizations. They knew that doomed species became cautious, that fear made armies hesitate. They had never faced humans before. The first wave of human weapons struck the collective formation before their defense systems fully activated. 17 enemy ships exploded in the opening seconds, torn apart by weapons that should not have existed, technologies that humans had created specifically for this moment. The collective responded instantly. Thousands of ships broke formation, rushing toward the human fleet like a wave of darkness. Energy weapons that human understanding crackled through space, striking human ships with devastating power. There was hit in the first exchange, its forward sections vaporized by a weapon that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. But the ship did not retreat. Its crew sealed the breached compartments and continued firing, pouring missiles into the enemy until nothing remained of the cruiser but a burning skeleton that still somehow moved forward. "They are not stopping," the collective's central intelligence noted, analyzing the battle data. "Damage to vessel is 90%. Crew survival estimated at 12%. They are still attacking." This was not in their calculations. The battle spread across millions of kilometers. Human ships moved in patterns that the collective had never seen, tactics born from thousands of years of human warfare, adapted for space combat in ways that no machine could predict. The Hannibal released its fighter squadrons, 300 small craft that dove into the enemy formation with suicidal courage. The pilots knew that most of them would not survive the first pass. They attacked anyway, targeting the weak points in collective ships that human engineers had identified through days of analysis. "Elephants, this is Squadron Leader Park," the lead pilot announced over the communication channel. "Remember your training. Remember why we are here. Make every shot count." 62 fighters were destroyed in the first minute. The remaining 238 destroyed 94 enemy ships before they were overwhelmed. The Shaka Zulu danced through the battle like a ghost, appearing behind enemy lines, striking with devastating speed, then vanishing before the collective could respond. Captain had trained her crew for exactly this kind of chaos, and they performed perfectly. "They cannot track us," her navigation officer reported with something like wonder in his voice. "We are moving faster than their targeting systems can follow." "Then we keep moving, find their command ships, cut the head off the snake." The positioned itself at the center of the human formation, its massive hull absorbing enemy fire that would have destroyed lesser vessels. Inside, Sergeant Han waited with her Marine unit, knowing that eventually the collective would try to board. The enemy came through the hull breaches like nightmares, mechanical creatures with too many limbs and weapons built into their bodies. They moved with perfect coordination, each one connected to the collective's central intelligence. Had expected to be afraid. She had spent weeks preparing herself for the terror of facing an enemy that could not be reasoned with, could not be frightened, could not be stopped. But when the moment came, she felt nothing but clarity. "Hold the line," she ordered her squad. "They want our reactor, they will not have it." The fighting in the corridors lasted 6 hours. Human Marines died by the dozens, overwhelmed by machines that felt no pain and knew no hesitation. But for every human that fell, more stepped forward. Engineers who had never trained for combat picked up weapons from fallen soldiers. Medical staff defended wounded patients with whatever they could find. Herself killed 37 collective drones before a plasma blast took her legs. She refused medical evacuation, propping herself against a wall and continuing to fire until her ammunition ran out. When her rifle was empty, she grabbed a maintenance tool and waited for the next enemy to come within reach. "Why do you continue?" a collective drone asked her, its mechanical voice echoing through the damaged corridor. "Your death is certain. Your species' extinction is certain. Resistance serves no logical purpose." Smiled, blood running down her face from a cut above her eye. "You do not understand us at all." She detonated her final grenade as the drone reached for her. Across the battlefield, the collective's central intelligence was experiencing something it had never felt in 30,000 years of existence. Its calculations were failing. Every projection showed that humans should have surrendered or retreated by now. The mathematics were clear. The human fleet was being destroyed. They were losing ships faster than the collective. But they were not retreating. Worse, for every human ship destroyed, 4 collective ships fell with it. The humans were taking their enemies with them, trading lives at a rate that no civilization had ever achieved. Analysis required, the Central Intelligence announced to its processing units. Human behavior does not match projected patterns. Recalculate. The answer came back the same, again and again. Humans did not fight to survive. They fought to make their deaths expensive. The battle continued for 19 hours. The human fleet lost half its ships. The collective lost 8,000, more than they had lost in their previous 100 conquests combined. Admiral Park watched the displays, tracking losses, calculating trajectories, issuing orders that sent ships to their deaths. Her heart broke with every name that vanished from the board, every vessel that went silent, every crew that burned in the darkness. But her voice never wavered. "Maintain pressure," she ordered. "They are starting to hesitate. I can see it in their formations. They are calculating whether this is worth it." Admiral said quietly, "We cannot sustain this rate of loss. In 3 more hours we will have nothing left. Then we have 3 hours to make them decide that destroying us is too expensive." On the Prometheus's weapon deck, Engineer monitored the lance. The weapon had not been fired yet. It was their final option, their last desperate move. He hoped they would not need it. He knew they probably would. The 19th hour began. The human fleet was down to 1,700 ships. The collective still had 32,000. And then something incredible happened. The collective Central Intelligence issued an order that had never been issued before in the history of their civilization. Retreat. The enemy began to pull back, their perfect formation breaking apart as 32,000 ships turned and fled toward the edge of the solar system. Admiral Park watched them go, her exhausted mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "They are running," whispered. "The Void Collective is running." "They are not running," corrected him, her voice grim. "They are regrouping. They will analyze what happened here. They will find weaknesses in our tactics. They will return with new strategies." "But we won, did we not win?" Looked at the battlefield, at the drifting wreckage of 2,000 human ships, at the expanding clouds of debris that had once been her people. "We survived, that is not the same as winning." She straightened in her chair, forcing steel into her spine. "And we are not done yet. Navigation, plot their retreat vector, find out where they are going." Navigator Song bent over his console, his fingers moving with desperate speed. "They are heading toward the outer rim. There is a station there, massive, orbiting a dying star." He looked up, his face pale. "I think it is their staging point, their forward base." Admiral Park made her decision instantly. "Then that is where we are going." The hunt was about to begin. When the universe sent a threat, humanity answered with a fleet of legends. Part 5: The Answer. The Prometheus pursued the retreating collective fleet alone. Admiral Park had given the order against the direct commands of the Terran Council. They had ordered her to hold position, to defend the solar system, to wait for reinforcements that both of them knew would not arrive in time. She had listened to their arguments, nodded respectfully, and then done what she believed was necessary. "If we let them regroup, they will return stronger," she told the council during their final transmission. "We hurt them today. We surprised them. If we give them time to analyze what went wrong, they will never be surprised again." The council president's face was tight with anger. "You are taking our most powerful warship on a suicide mission. You are abandoning the defense of Earth. I am finishing the war before it can begin again." She had cut the transmission before they could respond. Now the Prometheus hurtled through fold space, chasing an enemy that had never been chased before. The ship's crew knew what was coming. Captain had gathered them in the main hangar and explained the situation with absolute honesty. The lance can destroy the collective's forward base. It is the only weapon we have that can guarantee complete destruction, but firing it will tear this ship apart. She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. We are asking for volunteers to stay aboard for the final approach. Everyone else will evacuate to the escape pods. Silence filled the hangar. 1,700 crew members stood in neat rows, listening, processing, understanding. Then Engineer raised his hand. I will stay. I designed the weapon. I should be here when it fires. Navigator Song stepped forward. I will stay. Someone needs to guide us to the target. One by one, hands rose throughout the hangar. Not everyone, but enough, more than enough. Felt tears pressing against her eyes, but she did not let them fall. You understand what this means? We understand, replied. We have understood since the day we volunteered for this ship. Admiral Park had been watching from the back of the hangar. She walked forward now, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. I will stay as well, she announced. Turned to face her. Admiral, you cannot, you are too valuable, the fleet needs you. The fleet needs a symbol, someone to remember, someone to build legends around, smiled, and for a moment she looked younger, less burdened by the weight she had carried for so long. I have given orders for 93 days. I have sent thousands of people to their deaths. It is time for me to stand beside them. No one argued, they understood. The Prometheus emerged from fold space at the edge of the collective staging system. Before them hung the station, a massive structure orbiting a dying star. It pulsed with energy, billions of processes running inside its depths, the accumulated intelligence of 30,000 years of conquest. 32,000 ships in defensive formation, reported from his station. He had volunteered to stay as well, refusing to leave the admiral he had served for 20 years. They see us. They are preparing to fire. How long until we reach optimal firing range? 3 minutes. We will not survive that long. Admiral Park nodded slowly. Then we need a distraction. She opened a communication channel, broadcasting on every frequency the collective might be monitoring. Void Collective, this is Admiral Park of the Terran Alliance. I have a message for your Central Intelligence. The response came immediately, a cold, mechanical voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. You have come to your extinction. Your single ship cannot threaten us. Your weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. Your strategy is illogical. Perhaps, leaned forward in her chair, let me tell you a story. Stories are irrelevant, data is relevant, logic is relevant. Then consider this data. 93 days ago you sent us a message. You gave us a choice, submit or be erased. In those 93 days my species built a fleet from nothing. We developed weapons that your analysis never predicted. We fought a battle that killed 8,000 of your ships. She paused. No species has ever done that. An anomaly. We have adjusted our calculations. Have you? Then let me give you more data to process. Stood, walking toward the main until the image of the station filled her vision. In my species' history we have faced extinction dozens of times. Ice ages, plagues, wars that killed billions. Each time the mathematics said we should die. Each time we survived. Previous survival does not guarantee future survival. Logic is clear. Logic is limited. Logic cannot calculate what a human being will do when their family is threatened. Logic cannot predict the strength of a parent protecting their child or a soldier defending their home. His voice hardened. Logic told every species you ever fought that resistance was pointless. They believed it. We did not. The collective was silent for a long moment. The Prometheus continued its approach, enemy weapons charging but not yet firing. 2 minutes to optimal range, Song announced quietly. You believe you can win, the collective finally said. Your belief is incorrect. We have simulated every possible scenario. Your ship will be destroyed before you reach firing range. Your weapon will never be deployed. You simulated human behavior based on 2,000 other species, but we are not them. We have never been them. Returned to her chair and sat down with careful dignity. Here is my final message to you. Whatever happens today, remember us. Remember that when you came for humanity, we did not beg. We did not hide. We came for you. She cut the communication channel. 1 minute to optimal range. Enemy weapons are firing. The first impacts struck the Prometheus like hammers. The ship shuddered, hull breaches appearing across multiple decks. Crew members at their stations died instantly, vaporized by weapons that existed in dimensions humans could not perceive. But the ship kept moving. 45 seconds, power to the lance. Engineer worked his console with bleeding fingers, rerouting systems, compensating for damage, keeping the weapon alive through pure determination. 30 seconds, lance is charged. Another impact tore through the ship, nearly splitting it in half. The lights flickered, went dark, then returned at reduced power. More names vanished from the crew roster, more lives ended in fire and vacuum. 20 seconds, targeting solution locked. Navigator Song held his course steady despite the chaos around him. He had calculated this trajectory 1,000 times. He could have done it blind. He would have to, because his console had just exploded. 10 seconds. Admiral Park watched the station grow larger in the dying star behind it painted everything in shades of red and orange, like a sunset at the end of the universe. She thought of her children, the billions of human beings she had promised to protect. 5 seconds. Captain placed her hand on the firing control. Fire. The lance activated. For one brief moment, the Prometheus became the object in the galaxy. Energy poured from its weapon in a beam of pure annihilation, channeling the fury of a dying quasar through systems that had been designed to do exactly this, exactly once. The beam struck the collective station, and the station ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, erased. The weapon punched through the structure like it was made of paper, continued through the dying star behind it, and kept going into the darkness beyond. Everything in its path simply stopped being. 30,000 years of accumulated intelligence, the central hub of the Void Collective, the memories of 2,000 conquered civilizations. Gone. The Prometheus was torn apart by the recoil, exactly as the engineers had predicted. The ship's hull fragmented, escape pods launching in the final seconds as automated systems completed their last duty. Admiral Park did not reach an escape pod. Neither did Engineer or Navigator Song or Lieutenant. They died with their ship, in the light of their own weapon, surrounded by the debris of an enemy that had believed itself invincible. But some of the crew survived. Captain was found drifting in her escape pod 7 hours later by a rescue vessel. The observer had transmitted the Prometheus's final coordinates to his people, begging them to send help. 43 crew members were recovered, 43 witnesses to the moment when humanity answered the universe's threat. The Void Collective did not die that day. They were too vast, too spread across the galaxies to be killed by a single weapon. But their central intelligence, the mind that had guided their conquests for 30, was gone. The remaining ships fell into chaos, unable to coordinate, unable to adapt. In the years that followed, humanity and their allies hunted down the scattered remnants. It took decades. It cost millions more lives. But eventually, the collective became nothing more than a memory. And humanity became something else. The observer spent the rest of his life documenting what he had witnessed. His final report became required reading in every academy and school across 3 galaxies. I have studied 2,000 civilizations, he wrote in his conclusion. I have seen species that were stronger than humans, older, wiser, more technologically advanced, All of them fell to the void collective. Humans should have fallen as well. The mathematics were clear. The logic was undeniable, but humans did not believe in mathematics. They did not accept logic. They believed in something else, something I have spent decades trying to understand. I think finally I have found the answer. Humans believe in each other. They believe that together they can accomplish the impossible. They believe that no matter how dark the night, they will find a way to bring the morning. This is not logical. This is not mathematical, but it is powerful beyond anything I have ever witnessed. My final recommendation to all species in the galaxy is simple: never threaten humanity, not because they are strong, not because they are clever, but because they will never, ever stop fighting for each other. And in the end, that is the only mathematics that matters. A century after the war, a monument floated in the space where the Prometheus had been destroyed. It bore the names of everyone who had died there, and at its base, a simple inscription. When the universe sent a threat, humanity answered with a fleet of legends. This is where we learned that legends are not born from victory. They are born from the courage to fight when victory seems impossible. Young beings from across 3 galaxies made pilgrimages to the monument. They came to pay their respects, to understand what had happened there, to learn from the species that had looked into the abyss and refused to blink. And sometimes, when the light of distant stars hit the monument at just the right angle, visitors swore they could hear something. A sound like singing. A sound like 17 billion voices, raised together in defiance. A sound that said very clearly, we are still here. And we always will be. The end.